Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Landon.
I'm Kason.
Today we are going to be fielding exclusively viewer-suggested topics. Had a lot of great questions this week, and so we're going to jump into those.
It's like a holiday or something.
I know. Guys, you had awesome thoughts and ideas this week.
It's called Viewer Appreciation Day.
Viewer Appreciation
It's called Sub for Sub Day. I sub, you sub day.
Wait, is this the 65th podcast?
Is it?
The 65th podcast, Viewer Appreciation Podcast.
Viewer Appreciation Podcast.
First question comes from Tree. He asks, do you think that new games in the Final Fantasy series would benefit more from having mature storylines that deal with heavier and possibly difficult or controversial themes to talk about? Okay, and then we got Prague Ludwig. I'll summarize this one. It's a little long. Basically, he is touching on the fact that I've talked in the past about appreciating story over gameplay in video games, and he's wondering why that is, and he's expressing some disagreement on that. So I have a chance to clarify my thoughts on that. Then we got Velhart. I love this question. If you were working at North American Square Enix, NA Square Enix, what would you personally do to try and make the game appealing to Western audiences? He's talking about how, despite the fact that it's, pretty much universally seen as good a game, it just doesn't sell as well in the West as they'd like it to. So what would we do to change that?
Cool.
This next guy, Magigact the Magigact. That's a great name. Which Final Fantasy game do you think has the best theme in its story? Good question. Skelehart's Beast. Who are your favorite game side characters? Why, and what do you think they added to the game? Okay, Captain Awesome. I'd like to see more games keep battles fresh from the to the end of the game, but how do they go about doing that? So the question is about RPG battle systems getting stale
how they kind
by
of
the end of the
grind
game.
and
Yeah. Is there a way to keep them more interesting? Chalk the Rub, what are the most or least interesting parts of creating your reviews, Lost in Translations, Dark Histories? What interesting, surprising things have you learned from making them? Good question. And HD Beard, this one got upvoted a lot last week. Idea for a topic, just what is Final Fantasy? What links all these different stories? What themes, philosophies, feelings, etc.? Even though the creative direction changed after number 10, there's still an adherence to an approach that sets it apart from other JRPGs.
There you go.
Sick.
Okay. Olive Tree. Do you think that new games in the Final Fantasy series would benefit from having more mature storylines and deal with heavier and possibly difficult controversial themes to talk about?
Why does this feel so familiar to me? I almost feel like we talked about this exact thing last week.
Slightly. But, and now the question is, should they do it? Like, they kind of tried to do it in 15, and we ended up getting kind of, I think, like a watered-down version of the mature themes and,
the Death Gods. That would be very mature if they kept the Death Gods.
Yeah.
Dude, that was actually really, really interesting. I kind of wish... I don't wish that they had... Well, I do, but what I'm trying to say is I wish I knew what that was. Like, I wish there was a way to find out what they were planning on doing there. If only that, I just want to know what the plan was for that, because it sounds freaking crazy.
Well, okay, we were just talking about this last week, not on the podcast, but I think this was off the podcast. Final Fantasy Peasant leading up to the release of Final Fantasy 15. You guys, if you're following us, you probably also following him.
Right.
He talked a lot about his different theories, from all the little bits that he'd seen and all the pictures and all the little details. And he's really good at putting
he actually
theories
is
together.
Really good at
he's really good at
reading
that.
into that stuff.
He had some stuff that I feel like was 100% plausible and probably was the underlying what was supposed to be going on, but that they obviously freaking threw aside because of
they
time constraints. But he's got some interesting videos along those lines for anyone to go and watch. We'll never know if that's canon, but it does. That does come to my mind here talking about the Death God thing.
At least a few things the developers have admitted, that was too much. We took that out because of PC reasons.
Oh right, like Luna Freya, being treated poorly.
So like domestic violence, that would be a mature theme.
Oh, I see what you meant. Yeah.
You would assume that most video games don't really deal with, but this game was Final Fantasy 15 was kind of thinking about talking about it, and then decided not to when people thought the imagery was too harsh?
Yeah, it's kind of a hard question to answer because, I mean, I think the series has, along the way, dealt with some pretty heavy stuff. I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot of dealing with, like, the idea of your own mortality in Final Fantasy IX.
Yeah. Final Fantasy IV, I think, with Cecil's, like, wife. I don't know.
Oh, Rosa, yeah. His fiance, yeah.
Or fiance, yeah. There's some... I don't know. There's some interesting stuff there too. 7 obviously did too.
Like, yeah, and 6. I mean, like, there's a whole bunch of them 6. That deal with heavier themes.
Like amnesia. Yeah, they all deal with amnesia.
The darkest of all themes. Amnesia.
Yes, amnesia.
They should forget how to eat food also.
Which is what actually happens when people wake from comas and stuff. The
thing is that I mean, you know, like suicide in Final Fantasy VI, like they touch on stuff like that, but they have really large contrast too, where they deal with a lot of silly stuff and they try to keep it lighthearted in a lot of places. So, you know, I
do like that they do both.
Yeah, it's a game with heavy contrast, or a series with heavy contrast, and I think that that's actually really good because it makes the darker stuff feel a lot more impactful. When you have this wide swing of contrast in between different scenes. I know sometimes you can go a little too far with that, but I think Final Fantasy, for the most part, has done a good job. But so it's hard to say should it deal with it, because it has to some extent, but Kaysen's right in saying that with 15 at least, some of their plans were to deal with some of that heavy stuff maybe a little bit more directly.
Yeah, I think so.
And then they chickened out a little bit. And I can't fault them for that, because would it benefit the series from an artistic standpoint? Like, possibly, if they, you know, handled it the right way. We kind of talked about this a lot in last week's podcast about political correctness and the fear of game companies to release something that might offend people. And so it might not benefit them to do that if it created a bunch of controversy, right? So it's hard to say. It'd have to be handled with a lot of tact. It'd have to be handled in a way that tries to, you know, like we were saying last week, bring exposure and awareness to an issue, and not in a way that makes light of it, or that, I don't know, maybe unrealistically portrays it or something like that. It's just a tough thing to do. So,
you know,
I don't know.
I like what you were saying about how Final Fantasy deals with, like, such heavy contrast and such, like, light themes and dark themes. You got your chocobos, you got your mini games, you've got your, like, your more goofy aspects and elements of the game mixed in. And it's funny when they tried to do that with Final Fantasy 15, and I didn't feel like it fit all that well. I mean, you had the whole Chocobo festival, and you could put on your Chocobo hat.
Yeah, Noctis looks freaking...
The sombrero. So and it's like, Final Fantasy 15 already was pretty, you know, pretty intense as far as video games go, to be... You know, it kind of takes you out of things quite a bit when you start to put in these silly elements. And it makes me wonder if a lot of the heavier stuff that they possibly had initially planned to have put in the game, and then ended up taking out, if that would have made it even more obvious that, like, why are you putting that in this game? That doesn't belong in this game. That is too silly. Whereas the other Final Fantasies, I never really got that. It's always been well understood, like, from the get-go. Even in Final Fantasy 13, right? Like, the first, like, side character you meet, the dude with the bird in his afro, like, that sets you up for the you know, the world. The first person besides Lightning that you're around is, like, kind of, you know, a goofy, silly dude, right? And obviously he has some character progression throughout the game, but that sets the tone. Final Fantasy 15 doesn't have anything like that. And then all of a sudden, these things are kind of jarring when the silly elements are thrown in and the goofy, funny parts are thrown in. It doesn't quite fit. And it would have fit even less if they decided to go even more mature with the story.
You know, and that's... Sorry, go ahead, Landon.
You look at... See, I just realized the biggest piece of news this week that we did not talk about is that Dragon Quest XI launched in Japan.
It did.
Dragon Quest XI coming, 8 months on the heels of Final Fantasy 15. They could not contrast more with each other, even though they're technically in the same genre. If you look at the art direction and if the writing, obviously, I haven't read much of it, in the Japanese, but if the series has had a very strong, identity writing wise, and they definitely allow for more of the running gag type stuff like you're talking about. In the Dragon Quest series, it's almost part of like their heritage. It's almost part of why people are there, right? This shared, like, there's always going to be the what do they call it, like fua. I'm trying to remember what it's called, where it's like the sexual innuendo that they work into things, and definitely lighter hearted than Final Fantasy has really ever been, at least mainline Final Fantasy. And so it's hard when that's like Final Fantasy has an identity, and when you compare those two games, Final Fantasy already is dealing with more mature storylines and heavier topics. Not that, like, if somebody dies in a Dragon Quest game, not that you don't care about the character, but it feels a little different than like the drama surrounding somebody dying in, like, say, Final Fantasy 15, for example. Because somebody dies in that game. Somebody might die. So
you don't know that.
Anyways, that's just kind of what
you didn't play it. You don't know.
Define death.
I think Final Fantasy already is like compared to most JRPGs. Barring indie games, there's obviously indie games that go deeper than that. But for a series that is trying to maintain mass appeal, like, the larger the budget gets, the more they need that mass appeal, and so people shy away from that stuff. But for as big of the budgets as they've had for Final Fantasy, they've actually stuck closer to these darker things than a lot of different pieces of media that you might see. So
that's the difficulty when you go too dark, though. I think what turns a lot of people off from Final Fantasy 12 specifically is that there aren't a lot of the lighter elements to the story. It's really heavy. It is, except when Vaughn has his, like, derpy moments, when, like, everyone leaves and Vaughn's still there, and they're like, Vaughn, we're leaving, and he's like, oh, and he runs and follows them.
Why do you matter?
Why was that doesn't fit? His whole character kind of doesn't fit because he's a little bit derpy, and it doesn't work, right? But if they had a little more lighthearted story, Vaughn would have fit just fine. But they kind of tried to inject that where it didn't belong.
Yeah, I like that you brought up Final Fantasy 12, but because Yasumi Matsuno, the original director for that game, who did Final Fantasy Tactics and Vagrant Story,
Tactics doesn't have much.
Yeah, his stories are where you can find this, I think, much heavier kind of
Vagrant Stories
level of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
If that's the kind of thing you're looking for, I think those are good examples. And I find it interesting that most of his games were they weren't part of the main series. They were side projects. And then a main series game that took that kind of tone, at least upon release, it's been remembered a little more fondly now, but upon release was not that well received. Like, people were kind of upset about it. It didn't feel like Final Fantasy to people. And so I think that the same was going to be true of the Final Fantasy 15 story originally, when it was Final Fantasy Versus 13. I think as Versus 13... as Versus 13, it could have contained all that stuff and probably would have been okay to take those kinds of risk.
Yeah.
But when it became a main series game, I think that they became a little bit more worried about what should be and what shouldn't be in a mainline Final Fantasy game that's supposed to have more mass appeal and is to a broader audience. And so I think that whether it would benefit from it or not artistically, it's probably just a better idea financially from their standpoint to deal with some of it to some extent, death and some of the things that they've explored before, but maybe not like, domestic abuse or, sexual assault or like that kind of dark stuff.
Right.
Probably just shouldn't be in a Final Fantasy game, to be honest.
I mean, that is a possible way that they can take it.
Probably a good idea in the main series to just kind of stay away from
right. But what's kind of funny, I mean, they continue to make these side games, right? And with Final Fantasy 15, you're seeing less of the side games and more of DLC that fits into the main game. And so I'm seeing, and I know Final Fantasy 13 wasn't that long ago, right? And so I'm having very short-term memory when I say this on purpose, but I'm just saying it appears as though there will be less opportunities for those in-between side games that you're talking about going forward if they decide to go this DLC route to add to the main game instead of Final Fantasy 13-2, Final Fantasy Versus 13, Final Fantasy Tactics, and the like.
Yeah, having just alternate
sense,
universe
these
DLCs
types of stories will be almost non-existent, at least from Square Enix and with the Final Fantasy franchise.
They'll be on the phone.
Or they'll be on your phone. Or they'll be like on their online game. They might release a new MMO for Final Fantasy 17 or something. Who knows? But those are usually pretty lighthearted, though.
I just saw my white balance is screwed up. I gotta fix that. There we go.
Oh shoot!
My skin was white as snow.
White as snow.
Anyways, good question. Thank you, Olive Tree. Hopefully, that's an answer to your question. And if you guys disagree with us, let us know. I'm always down for darker stories. I like stuff that deals with heavy concepts, but I'm not sure if
I wouldn't mind them every now and then. I would like for Final Fantasy to take on that stuff from time to time instead of staying in the safe zone, which is what they tend to do.
Yeah. Okay, Prague Ludwig. Here's a good one. I noticed in one of your other videos that Mike prefers story over gameplay in video games. This has always been a very weird notion to me. Story can certainly enhance the gameplay experience, but if the gameplay doesn't come first, what you're left with is basically a movie or a book with interactive elements. When gameplay comes first, it can enhance story aspects that would be weaker without it. For example, having the protagonist fight a challenging boss to portray how strong the villain actually is. Also, when gameplay is considered as the focus, concepts like aesthetics through gameplay mechanics step in. The world of Dark Souls feels more suffocating because every swing is slow and exhausting. Maybe discuss your views on this on the next episode.
Okay, we'll do it next episode.
The next episode. Moving on to the next one.
Next week.
Thanks, man. Good seeing you.
Thanks for the question.
Great question. We'll see you next week. No, I wanted to take this time to clarify because I think I've said things like I'm a gameplay first, or I'm sorry, I'm a story first over gameplay type of player. And I say things like that. I think what I mean when I say that is I prefer a game that sets out to tell a story versus a game that is just made for gameplay. Final Fantasy versus Super Mario, right? Like, Mario is not trying to tell a story. So I prefer games that attempt to tell a story. But I think that gameplay and story are equally important. And I am actually a big proponent of telling the story through gameplay. So I've talked about this a lot on past podcasts, so I might be repeating some things I've said before, so forgive me for that. But I want to respond specifically to the part where you said story can certainly enhance the gameplay experience, but if the gameplay doesn't come first, what you're left with is basically a movie or a book with interactive elements. And that statement you're making right there, that is what separates a video game from a movie, is the fact that it is interactive, the fact that you can participate in it. And that's the reason why I love video games so much as a storytelling medium, because you can connect with it so much more when you're participating in it, when you're a part of that story versus being a passive, third-person omniscient perspective where you're seeing it all happen or watching it unfold. You get to actually be a part of it. That element right there is what separates games from other mediums and makes it its own unique art form, is the gameplay. So having said that, I'm not saying that gameplay should be focused on in development after the story, and that the story should come first as a priority for developers. In fact, I don't see it the other way around either. I don't think gameplay should be the first priority or the focus. I think where you start is with a concept, with a theme, or whatever it is you want to communicate to the player if you want to tell a story. And you say, how do we communicate that? Not just with writing and dialogue and characters and narrative. How do we communicate those same things with the gameplay too? How do we use that along with all of the other parts to communicate these messages? A couple of my favorite examples are Final Fantasy VII, during the original telling of the Nibelheim incident. So when they go to Calm right after the Midgar section and Cloud is telling them the story, there's a small section of that where you are in a party with Sephiroth. And when Cloud goes and attacks an enemy, he does this tiny, minuscule amount of damage, level 1 character. And you got Sephiroth next to him, a level 50 character, going up there and just like massacring these huge monsters in 1 or 2 hits using level 3 magic. At this point in the game, you get like a sneak peek at what like level 3 ice is going to look like, what level 3 fire is going to look like. You can go in to his equipment and look at the equipment that he's wearing, and it's just like, holy crap, that communicates to the player how strong this guy is way, way, way more clearly than anything they could have told me. They could have said, holy crap, guys, Sephiroth is so powerful. Oh my gosh. They could have told me that in a million different ways. It would not have had the same impact as me clicking attack on an enemy, running up there and doing nothing, and then him running up and killing it. That is such an amazing, clear communication through gameplay of how powerful this guy is. And it set him up on this pedestal like, what? Like, this guy's awesome, dude. Like, I'm going to have to fight him later? That's crazy. That is the kind of thing that I really want video games to strive for more, is to rely less on the types of storytelling that you see in film with cutscenes and communicating those messages even more through gameplay. So hopefully that clarifies that for you. I don't hold the position that one or the other aspect should come first. I think they should be held equally and that they should be working together to communicate the story, if that makes sense.
I'll say something.
Okay.
I think gameplay comes first. So you can put something in the comments and I'll clarify next week. I'll fight over this. No, I'm just kidding. I do think gameplay comes first, but my personal opinion. Me and Mike do not. We all kind of like differ on certain areas, but
there's different schools of thought on that. Like Shigeru Miyamoto is one of those.
Right.
Also, he doesn't give a crap about like
story,
story at all.
Which of course is the extreme.
Yeah, it's like, what do you care? What do you care to do? I mean, there's different kinds of people, right? Like there's a reason. Like if we're talking about movies, like there's a reason why some people are way into these like black and white art films or like the new wave French cinema. You know what I mean? You could get into that, and there's people that appeals to, and then there's people that it doesn't. And then,
cinema verite.
Exactly. Yeah, there's just like there's different tastes and preferences. I think all anyone can speak to, really, like what Mike was just saying, is like that's what he wants and that's what he enjoys and what he would love to see more of, right? And so, you know, that's just video games are interesting.
It's true that there isn't enough of that.
They add another layer. They add another layer to like something you could potentially drop the ball here. Also, it's more juggling than like other art forms tend to be. I feel like. So,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, things can be either story could be an afterthought, or gameplay could be an afterthought. We've seen plenty of that.
And my personal opinion is I would rather have a story be an afterthought than gameplay be an afterthought. A game can have a bad story but good gameplay. It's a good game. But if it's got an awesome story but bad gameplay, it's a bad game.
My list of like favorite games of all time, for the most part, are games that almost don't have a story at all.
You know, unfortunately. Well, my favorites though are the story ones. It's like top 5 are mostly story content games, but then the next like 20 are Mario Kart, Splatoon, Smash Brothers. You know, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So yeah.
But yeah, I've touched on like my thoughts on Uncharted versus like The Last of Us specifically, where I think that in either example, the gameplay doesn't communicate the message of the game in like Uncharted, but it does.
Right, there's the incongruency.
Yeah, it does in The Last of Us. So like for me, if I'm playing a game that is story driven, which is generally what I want to do, and Uncharted is very much a story driven. It's a cinematic. It's like the most cinematic kind of game that you can play. I feel like when I'm playing the game, I'm not getting what the story is through that gameplay. It's like all of the massacres, just like hundreds of people you're killing, and that's not it's not really what the story of that game's about. And so that disconnect for me, I'll still play it. It's still fun to play, but like to me, it doesn't like take it to that next level, being something that really sticks with me long term. And so that's what I look for, and that's what I like in games, is when they put equal weight on both things, and they use them to communicate the same message.
Mario Rabbids, dude, they might finally give Mario the story he deserves.
That game's gonna be awesome. Let's see.
Thanks for the question.
I don't think there was anything else.
Actually, one last thing to mention on this topic. People talk about Resident Evil a lot when they talk about this, because he was mentioning the controls of Dark Souls being contributing to the suffocating feeling.
Oh, yeah.
And again, I think it could be a divisive thing, because it's like the first time I ever played Resident Evil 4, that was the first Resident Evil game I played, I'm pretty sure.
It's a freaking good one.
I had a really hard time with it first. I was like, what the crap?
Me too.
I'm like stuck. Like,
I know you can't really move very fast.
What I want to do. And the frustration kicks in for me in any video game where I like think like I want to do this, and then I can't for the life of me figure out a way to do that. And sometimes it's just because you suck. And I would say that in that game it was probably because I just sucked at the game, and I was trying to do something outside the bounds of what the game was even made to do. But I think that's why parkour has been such a popular thing to add to video games, because it's like you could go anywhere you want. It doesn't like make it better all the time, but you could.
But you
and you're like, this is sick. I go everywhere, and then it causes more problems. But anyways, I was just thinking about that. The Resident Evil games, I've heard a lot of people say like, "Oh, these controls suck," and they're like, "No, but they make it scarier." And
they do. That is.
And is it not possible for those both to be true?
Yeah, right.
Like, the game's scarier when your arms tied behind your back, and it's scary. Or like
there's
zombie.
A button. Oh, Zombie U, where you have to look at your gamepad. There's a combination, like you pull back on the control stick and you hit B or something like that simultaneously, and he does a 180, right? But he can't turn left and right very quickly. But on a dime, man, he's just like boom, he can turn 180 super fast. It's just it's kind of funny.
But I think that's like you're saying, like the cinema verite, like the French New Wave cinema. Right. Like people can learn to appreciate that. It's like
it's an acquired taste.
Oh dang, they were going for this. I watched a documentary. This was like before we even started doing wedding videos. This is right after Kaysen got accepted to film school, actually. So it's right around
2010-ish, 29.
But anyways, it was a documentary by this French woman. Of course, French people, explain yourselves. But she had this part where she had forgotten that she'd left the camera on, and this was filmed in like the 90s, maybe early 90s. She forgot she'd left her camera on. And I don't remember what the documentary's about, but I will never forget this part. Those old cameras with the lens cap was like hanging by a string, because you're always popping it on and off, those old camcorders, like what we've shot all of our old crap on. Yeah. So she had it pointed down. She was just walking somewhere, and she'd been recording the whole time, and she left it in her movie. It's like, I swear it's a 5-minute long segment of she doesn't know the camera's on, and it's looking down, and the lens cap keeps bouncing into view, and she kicks on this like music, this like dancing music, and she just put a subtitle that said "The Dance of the Lens Cap," and it just plays like that. This is a documentary that's like an hour long or more, and there's a section of it with the dance of the lens cap, this complete accident and like absurd, ridiculous thing. But by the end of it, I was kind of like, I'm into this. I don't freaking know why. What the heck?
That's probably what she thought too. She's like, "This is kind of hypnotizing.
Well,
I should keep that in."
Yeah, I don't know, dude. It's weird. There's some things on their surface can seem like objectively bad. Like this is making things worse, no question. But sometimes when you like get past that initial hump, there's value to be had in like those weird sorts of things, like bad game mechanics. There's so many games that are only played anymore today because they had bad game mechanics. Superman 64 is one of those. No one would freaking ever play Superman 64 anymore these days, or E.T. from the Atari, if it weren't for the fact that this is so hard, you got to try it, and people hear about it and then they like keep playing it. There's some mad genius in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's funny. Yeah. Good question.
All right.
Felhart's next question, also a great one. If you were working at Square Enix North America, what would you personally do to try and make the games more appealing to Western audiences? Start this with a caveat. I'm not saying they should do this. I'm not saying I even want them to do this. I like Dragon Quest games the way they are. And I think that the West should open their minds to it. That's what I think they should do. You're asking me what would I do if I was in the company and they were tasking me with making this more appealing. Okay?
Wait. This is about Dragon Quest?
Should be, yeah.
To make the game? What's the game?
It's Dragon Quest.
Okay. Oh, okay. I missed that part.
Okay, that is...
He's talking about
So he's talking about if you're... What would you do to make
more
Dragon Quest more appealing to...
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
This makes sense.
Because Dragon Quest isn't very big in the West.
Americans don't like it.
And Final Fantasy is, right. So when I first... Because he asked this last night on the stream, the Patreon stream that I was doing. By the way, playing Super Mario RPG on the Patreon stream. It's going awesome. So he asked it last night, and the first thing I thought about was, like, what was it that made Final Fantasy VII explode in the West? And I think for most people, it was that cover, the cover of the game.
Yeah, it was the art.
They
and the
had
sword.
a freaking cool-looking guy with a huge sword, and that was just so cool. And it was like that. For whatever reason, like American kids were like, "That's so sick! I've got to play that." Right?
And you know, the Square Enix knows that that's why, because look at how many promotions Tetsuya Nomura has had since designing that cover.
Yeah,
he freaking owns that company now.
Yeah, and I don't know, like Dragon Quest, I like the art style in Dragon Quest. I think is fine because Dragon Ball has been very well received all over the world. So I don't think there's anything wrong with Dragon Quest's art. I think that if they had a really like typically cool character in the main lead, right? Someone who is, I'm not saying looks like Cloud, but like has that like tougher sort of like design to him. Like I think most Dragon Quest
his hair parted down the middle.
It looks like a triangle.
Most Dragon Quest protagonists look very young, like very very young. Big eyes, like boys for the most part, like younger boys and stuff.
Yeah. If
they had like a little, I don't want to say too much older, but just like I hate using the word cool. A cooler main character. It's just not descriptive enough. It's too vague. But hopefully you guys know what I mean. Like people looked at Cloud and they said, "I want to buy that game." I don't think they're looking at any main character on the cover of Dragon Quest and saying, "Oh man, I gotta buy that game. That guy looks awesome."
That '80s bandana's not working for anybody.
Because if you look at like 90% of North American game box art, it's a freaking like gruff looking dude with chin down, eyes up, like looking real intense and mean. That sells to Western people. They want a tough dude to like power fantasy, you know. they want to be like a bad A guy, right? Again, I'll clarify. I'm not saying they should do this or that I want them to. I'm saying that would be one thing they could do to help it sell, is to have a main character more in line with that. Now, a lot of people were like, "Oh," we talked about political correctness last week, like not another white male tough guy lead. It doesn't have to be white. He could be olive skinned or black or whatever. Right. That's not the point. The point is that he's an awesome character. He looks cool.
Well, what's his name? The guy. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the first Assassin's Creed.
Altair.
Altair. He's Middle Eastern.
Yep.
He was.
Even though he had a total American actor.
Kind of close.
Yeah. It's so weird. But Ezio, like Ezio was Italian, and they've had what's his name? Connor was his American name, but the Native American character in that one, right? But in all the Assassin's Creed games, hooded figure, you can only see his face, chin down, eyes up, like looking at you like this. That sells to Western audiences for sure. So that'd be where I go first. Is to that.
Yeah, I think that first off, I want to say that I believe, this is my personal belief, that the reason why Dragon Quest is not as accepted in the West is because Enix did not take the proper steps in franchise building a long time ago.
Yes.
Most of the games you couldn't play here. And it was under a different title for a long time.
That's our Dragon Warrior, right?
Yeah. And it was like a copyright issue. So some of the Dragon Quest games have only within the last decade been accessible in the United States, for example. So I don't necessarily believe that the whole of the issue is in like something they can fix, like on this specific game, for example. Final Fantasy currently benefits from brand recognition that was like built up over a very, very long period of time of consistently releasing games, regardless of how long certain gaps may have been. There have been Final Fantasy games to play for going back in the West, going back to the NES. So Enix they screwed that up a long time ago, and they're kind of dealing with that now. Now they've continued to screw it up in some ways, because I think Dragon Quest X should not have just stayed in Japan. They didn't do themselves any favors there, because if this is what everyone's talking about right now. They're comparing this game to Dragon Quest VIII, because that was the last time,
and that's a game 3 entries ago,
extremely long time ago.
Jeez, that was like on the PS2,
and it's because that's the last time people got Dragon Quest, and that's the way they wanted it, right? Like Dragon Quest IX wasn't like what Westerners wanted. And Dragon Quest X was an MMO, which a lot of people just check out for the MMO entries of series, like Final Fantasy. Like a lot of people just don't play those ones.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think they've screwed up managing their brand. I don't think they've made like bad games or anything, and I don't think there's anything like inherent in like the art style itself that is like such a problem they can't overcome. But if you do stop and think, not everyone, for the most part, people who get into Dragon Ball got into it when they were like a teenager, right? Yeah. And it continues to be the case, I believe, even though they've got the new series going. I'm convinced there's just teenagers that are getting way into that now. And so there's a time frame where like that art style appeals more to Westerners, I feel like. And then if you try and make that work beyond that time frame, it has to appeal to nostalgia. Otherwise, I think you're not going to, like, for someone who wasn't already into that as a teenager, I don't think when they're 30 is going to be I'm going to pick up on this now. You know what I mean? As like a callback. Dragon Quest XI, first off, we don't know the official sales numbers, but in its first week in Japan, it very well is likely to have sold about 1 million copies on the PS4 and 1 million copies on the 3DS. That's a game launching in Japan, selling 2 million freaking copies.
Yeah, in Japan, that's impressive.
It's through the roof. It's through the roof. The only thing you can compare Dragon Quest II in Japan is Star Wars. And I'm trying to think what else is on the level of Star Wars. I mean, it's that freaking huge. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. And so they've succeeded so well over there because they've had a consistent presence. And so I feel like there's not a lot they can do now other than be consistent, because they've been so inconsistent up to this point that the West hasn't even been on their radar at all. And I think it easily could have been, and it easily could be at least as popular as Final Fantasy right now throughout the rest of the world if they cared enough to do that. Now, the thing is Square Enix, they own like the trademarks and stuff for the Dragon Quest games, but they don't have as much control over when any Dragon Quest anything comes out as they do Final Fantasy, because Yuji Horii essentially runs his own company that makes the games, and Akira Toriyama runs his own company that does the art design and everything. When you look at copyrights at the bottom, like we were talking about Tetsuya Nomura, you look at the copyrights at the bottom of any official screenshot from the game, and you're going to see like, I think it's Armor Project, and then like Bird Studio, Toriyama, Tori being Bird. Toriyama's studio, Bird Studio. Yeah. Anyway, Square Enix owns the trademark, so they can't just go and make their own Dragon Quest games. They have to work through Square Enix. Square Enix is also the publisher, so they're putting up the money for it, making it really happen. but they don't have as much control over the brand. Now, that being said, there have been a crap ton of Dragon Quest games outside of the main franchise of Dragon Quest. I think there have been like 40 something like spin-offs and various Dragon
don't
Quest
get those.
No. So that's what I'm saying. Like in Japan, it's just boom. No one's forgetting about this, right? So they're totally Disneying it up like Disney's doing with Star Wars, or will do very shortly with Star Wars.
Yes.
Right. And so, what I would say to this question is, there's freaking nothing really that they can do other than like be true to what the game is, and don't try and bring in people that wouldn't enjoy playing this kind of game. And then those people, you got to go with word of mouth, and you have to go with consistency, and maybe in like 10 years they'll have like brand recognition built back up. You know what I mean?
As long as they keep
the re-releases
releasing
have been helping. The 3DS,
the 3DS,
like Dragon Quest 8 and what was it, 5 on 3DS last September?
Any company that can release an old PS2 game on the 3DS now should be freaking doing it. No system being sold now has the install base that the 3DS has, and that is
just bring it back.
It's not. Well, I can't speak from experience, but I don't think it's that hard. So maybe it is.
Well, if you outsource it, if you get like
exactly,
that's what you have to do. It depends on how
go to Shanghai.
What quality matters to you?
There you go. No reason not to.
Yeah. So that's my Dragon Quest theory. Anyways, that's kind of the way I see it. It would be like if a Star Wars movie. We didn't get all the Star Wars movies over here.
Right.
Would people be as into Star Wars? No, they wouldn't. So, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So it's too bad.
I don't have much to add to that. I just I agree. They're in trouble. And as far as making it appealing, I would like take the biggest risk ever and totally change everything about it. Turn it into Dragon Quest, where it's like basically Skyrim. And then see if I can get a promotion or not. Maybe make some more money. If it sells well, awesome. If not, I'll go work at a different company.
Will it Skyrim?
Will it Skyrim?
I do think
Dragon Quest with Skyrim. I think.
Oh yeah.
One other thing that they could do, and again, this is coming from me, and I haven't finished any Dragon Quest game except 9. I've played a fair amount of 8 and a little bit of 5. I played Dragon Warrior 3 back in the day, actually. I totally forgot about that one. So I played Dragon Warrior 3 all the way through, but they tend to be real grind heavy. Like, really grind heavy. Almost more than any other RPG I've played, especially the really old ones. I would knock the amount of grinding needed down a little bit. That might be one other thing I would change for American audiences, but...
Those lazy
that
Americans.
would actually
it's not fun. Because
lazy Americans with their cheeseburger and their Coke, and they're sitting there like
the game.
Those freaking Americans. Yeah, freaking Americans.
Yeah, why doesn't the game play for me? I've already pushed A.
Where's the auto battle?
Okay. Well, actually, no, I take that back. Maybe what I would do instead of doing that is just put in... Nah, I changed my mind. Never mind. I'm not going to say that. They're going to get too pissed. Okay.
You would add Pokemon. You would add Pokemon to it.
Even though I've said ahead of time, I don't think they should change it. There will still be people mad at me for saying those things.
Oh, totally.
Even though I told them ahead of time.
Sorry,
I don't think they should do that.
Because I think they should change everything. So direct all those negative comments right here. I will defend myself in my American ways.
All right, The Magic Act asks, which Final Fantasy game do you think has the best theme in its story? That's a tough question.
There's a lot of themes, and then a lot of hidden smaller themes within each game too.
Yeah.
This is actually touching a little bit into what I was going to talk about with H.G. Beard's question, but I think they share a theme in a lot of them, which is self-discovery, like learning your place in the world and that sort of thing.
In that sense, almost all of them, coming of age,
the coming of age story,
yeah,
is essentially like what almost all Final Fantasy games are, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that theme is present in all of them, and it's always, not always, but almost always handled really well in a really interesting way. I think Final Fantasy IX did the best job of that with Vivi's character arc. At least that's the one that spoke to me the most out of all the games. So I'd say, like Vivi's struggle with mortality is probably my favorite theme in any of the Final Fantasy games. Personally.
You know what I love about Final Fantasy IX, because that's the game I thought of when I first read this question, is that the game is literally like so overt with its themes at that start screen.
Yeah.
It's like telling
true.
you.
It's like telling you what the character arc
every
is.
character's struggle.
That's
is.
right.
Like,
It shows
Yeah.
each one, and
there's
then,
a word, virtue, and then they're like, "What? Am I
What
real?"
if? Yeah. What
like,
if? Yeah.
I can't remember what the word was for Vivi's. Was it
Oh shoot, what was it? Hold on.
friendship? I don't know. Was his friend? Anyway, maybe. Anyways, I can't remember what I think that
9 open
honor was honor for Steiner.
Steiner.
Wasn't his honor
I think so.
or valor or something like that?
It was Garnett's honor.
Okay, hold on, it's coming up.
I can't remember, but I just
can't
love it.
remember.
It's cracking me up.
Got-
It's like
Mike's. I
We've-
think got it.
We've got hold on.
Got him.
Virtue for Zidane.
So now's the
Sorrow for Vivi.
Sorrow.
There you go.
Dilemma for Steiner.
Oh, there you
Ooh,
go.
dilemma.
Ooh.
I had a total-
Indulgence for Kina.
That's
Indulgence.
fantastic. That's all you need. To know.
That's the best theme of Final Fantasy 9 right
That
there.
is right there.
Devotion for Garnet.
Devotion. That was it.
Despair for Freya.
You
and
know-
arrogance for Amaranth.
For
Amaranth,
for
yeah.
buff wrestler fighter.
And
Redhead.
solitude. Solitude for freaking what the freak is her name? It starts
Aiko?
with E.
Aiko?
Aiko.
Oh,
that's
Aiko.
it.
Yeah. She's an interesting character.
Very interesting character.
She's kind of.
Anyways, yeah, that's
I
what
do
they were.
like Freya's character and her
Yeah,
issue that she has, and how she kind of just needs to move on, essentially, right?
I wish they had just finished her story.
I know, seriously.
They started out so good, it was like, forget
Oh,
you, never mind.
Because they're like, oh, let's tell you more of Zidane and Garnett's story. But it's like, no,
Yeah.
we're all about Vivi and Freya and Kina. Like, show us those characters, man. Get all into that stuff. Like, Zidane will do what he does,
Yeah.
That's fine, whatever. He's the main character. That's probably for the best. But, like, the side characters of that game are just so good.
Mm,
Yeah.
definitely.
Best ensemble cast.
Ensemble cast. They should win the Utah Film Award for
Yeah, Utah Film Awards for Best
Ensemble
Ensemble
cast.
Cast. If you guys didn't know, we won a Utah Film Award for Best Ensemble Cast in
We
our
did.
Imaginary Warzone web series, which you can find on our Dark Pixel channel, our filmmaking channel.
Just type Imaginary Warzone. Wait, did we agree? 1 word or 2 word? Warzone, 2 words, right?
I think it's one.
Is it 1 word?
it's
I
one
can't
word.
remember
I
how
think
we
it's
did it.
one.
Warzone.
I think anyways.
They're all titled with 1 word, Warzone.
Warzone, 1 word.
Hmm.
Holy crap!
So,
The entire first page of Google search is all of our videos of Imaginary Warzone. All of
Oh,
them.
wow.
sick.
So you can't miss it.
Can't
I
miss
think
it.
it is. I think
I
it is.
don't
I
think
think
you'll
it is
miss it.
literally every single one. It fills the whole page, like including the trailer for the web
Oh,
series.
the trailer, yeah.
Like with including that, all of our videos are exactly the right number to fill the first page of Google search.
Beastly.
We planned it that way, apparently.
We did that on purpose.
Guys, we're done. We're done now. Can't make any more. After
Yeah,
that.
can't make any more.
Filled up the space.
Apparently, no one else has done Imaginary Warzones. Just us.
Nope.
We own that.
It's our intellectual property.
So something I really like about Final Fantasy 15, as in general, I'm not like huge on every aspect of the game. I personally have not beaten it, but I do like the theme of Final Fantasy 15 as far as friendship goes. I feel like that game did a better job than almost any other game, at least at delivering that theme. There are other themes that it was lacking in, but they did a really good job with that core experience with your pals and really building the dynamic of your squad. And I feel like the friendship theme, especially at the very end of that game, I don't know if I should say anything about it, but you guys will know what I'm talking about. It comes through very, very well.
Hashtag squad goals.
Squad goals. Beat SF15.
Every Final Fantasy game's theme is to kill God through the power of friendship, and that one did it the best. Is what you're trying
That
to
one
say.
did it the best. That is exactly what I'm trying to say. How did you
No,
take
no,
the words
it's totally
out of my
different.
brain?
It's the power of brotherhood, not friendship.
Power of
Oh,
brotherhood.
shoot.
yeah.
But okay. He was an only child.
Okay, so yeah, and I think I've already kind of touched on Skellhart's next question. Who's your favorite game side characters and why, and what do you think they added to the game? I would pick Vivi from Final Fantasy IX because he added everything to it. I mean, the theme of that game, which is very much about self-discovery. It's very much about finding out, like, who am I? Like, why am I important? Like, what can I do? Like Garnet, like trying to struggle with the idea of like royalty and whether she can do that. Vivi with like, I'm different than everybody else, and then there's these other things that are like me, but I don't like resonate like so much with them. Like I don't like that they're enemies or they're bad guys or whatever. You got like Zidane's whole struggle with like he has no idea what the freak he is. There's nothing on Earth that's like him, and trying to find his place within like thieves guilds and place like that. Like all of them. Kina going out to try and find out how to be a good chef. They are literally all trying to discover who they are. Like that is like the whole theme of the game. And I think Vivi accomplished that for me better than any of the others, because I think his struggle is one that runs deeper and that is, I think, more common. At least everybody contemplates that at some point in their life and has to come to terms with that. So that'd be what I'd pick.
Favorite game side characters. I always really liked Gino. I thought Gino was.
Oh, Gino's the coolest.
Gino's
it's like a Deus Ex Machina. Like for some reason,
yeah, somehow
this dude's gonna help you now. But
luckily, he's awesome. Otherwise, that would be
I know. But it's freaking sick. I've always
cool.
Oh, this is ridiculous. Okay, we were so obsessed with Mario RPG. I remember we had a Grover puppet.
Oh yeah,
we had a Grover puppet, like Grover from Sesame Street.
Yeah, Blue.
I remember that. I freaking remember that thing.
Yeah, and so like we had our mom make like these felt like cape, like a felt cape, like Gino's cape, and like a cap and wizard's hat and stuff that we had pinned on him and stuff.
It was probably an upside down snow cone.
I'm trying to remember what it was. It was construction paper.
It might have been.
Anyways, we like made like a Gino like doll, because the idea it's like sweet. Toy Story, right? In fact, was this like the same year Toy Story came out?
96, yeah.
Holy
no,
crap.
95 I think was Toy Story, but yeah, it was like right around there.
Right around the same time.
Yeah.
Like, dude, toys come to life.
Funny.
Freaking sick. And especially if they like come to life and they have like a gun and they will and
when you're a kid, that is freaking.
He came to life and he's got a gun.
Thing.
Yeah. I love Gino. I think like plus you couldn't like in the booklet, it was a little more obvious what Gino looked like in the instruction manual.
Yeah. But
in the game, it's really like, what the crap?
Yeah, that's my one criticism with Super Mario RPG is Gino himself it's really hard for me to imagine like what he actually looks like. Like all the characters.
Don't think too hard about it, man. He is a naked full-size doll. Like just don't think about it too much.
Like all the other characters I can see really clearly. Their faces are large and their features are very easy to distinguish. And Gino's really hard to like imagine. Because also, he's a character. Well, I mean, Mallow is a unique character in that game too. He's not anything else. But Mallow his features are easier to see. Yeah. But like Gino, as cool as he is, he's an awesome character. Like probably the best character in that game for sure, in my opinion. But I just can't tell exactly what he looks like by looking at his sprite.
You know, for some reason in that game, and I don't know why they did this, but every character was rendered. Because obviously those are pre-rendered sprites, but in the actual character models that you see in the booklet, they were rendered as blobs. Like Mario is made up of a bunch of blobs.
They're made up of
and it was almost like they didn't want to have to rig something, so they just made a bunch of blobs that connected, and then those blobs could like move, you know, and like you could get all the poses that they were going to need to pre-render out, so that they would preserve that look. But if you go look up online, they're just made up of a bunch of circles, like people, and that does not translate like super great like into a low-res sprite form.
No,
necessarily. It's kind of like Mario is the weirdest looking Mario in that game.
The sprite looks fine, but the
CG, but when you see his model, it's like, what the crap?
It's unsettling.
Yeah, it's
weird. It is
that sprite of Mario is actually my favorite Mario look.
The sprite looks perfect. Yeah, I agree.
I love the sprite.
And Bowser, you just got two big ball things for like his nose.
Yeah,
that's like it was like I don't know. I feel like either that was an aesthetic choice, it's possible, but I almost feel like it was like they were trying to figure out how to do 3D graphics, and they I don't know. They can't even say that's true because Donkey Kong Country was not having to do that.
I swear they ripped or at least borrowed a Donkey Kong model from Donkey Kong Country.
They did.
The Donkey Kong enemy.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they did.
The gorilla
and he
enemy.
does his attack where he goes like
the green Donkey Kong or whatever.
And then
there's a bunch of different ones. Yeah.
This drop on you. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's right.
It looks exactly like something out of Donkey Kong.
But I swear that guy has like 3 eyes. The enemy that you fight.
I don't remember.
I can't remember.
I think they changed it a little bit.
I don't remember. Yeah,
they totally did that.
Yep.
Anyways,
so I'm having a hard time thinking of one specifically. The ones you guys have mentioned are like totally it, right? But whenever I can't think of something, I always go back to the games. I'm always like, oh man, what games have I played recently? And I played like 30 Nancy Drew games. So I have to say that Bess Marvin is actually a really good side character.
Who you call on the phone.
Yeah, typically you call on the phone, but some games she is there.
She shows
like
up.
in the Danger by Design, I think. The one where you're in River Heights and the school burns down and everyone thinks Nancy did it.
Of course.
That one, Bess is an actual character and she's freaking hilarious. So,
oh
yeah.
That's awesome. Bess.
What's his name? Bess.
Her name. It's Bess Marvin. Yeah.
Oh, Bess Marvin. Best OG or OP. Best
Honestly,
side character.
she's down the list a bit, but I like Gino and Vivi and Mallow. I mean, those are some pretty killer side characters there. I was thinking Zelda first. Also, I was like, oh, Legend of Zelda, like that. There aren't really like there are side characters, right? But they're not like Vivi. They're not like the side characters we're talking about. They're not
with you, like
they're just people who you catch glimpses of once in a while, and that's it. So I don't really consider them necessarily.
They're not all-time greats.
Like side characters, yeah. Like they're I don't know.
Beetle's pretty beastly, I gotta say.
Okay, Beetle's pretty fun.
Beetle's awesome.
Thank you.
Oh.
Okay, Captain Awesome's got our next question. I'd like to see more games that keep battles fresh to the end of the game, but how do they go about doing that? What games exemplify this done well? It was fun. I was a fan of how The Last Story fed you new mechanics over the course of the entire game to keep battles feeling fresh throughout. Obviously, Pokemon and Persona games do it through collecting new Pokemon and Persona. Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts. It is a very tough question for traditional turn-based Japanese role-playing games to find a way to make them super interesting all the way through.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of games where I was not tired of fighting by the end.
What the harder, like almost like Final Fantasy Tactics kind of games, like games that actually have a more complex system, or maybe not even more complex, but just like I think of it like chess. Like when I first started learning how RPGs, especially JRPGs, worked, and the turn-based system was really hard for me. I didn't like it at first, right? But thinking of a battle in terms of like a game of chess, I don't know, maybe chess games are boring. I guess they are for a lot of people, but chess doesn't feel there's no need to mix things up or to change things or to add moves or skill sets or whatever.
So sick of
it's all
chess.
there. It's all there the whole time. Yeah, and it's a battle of skills at who can use these pieces more effectively, and that's better when you're playing a person. When you're playing a computer, in your head, okay, they're being programmed to make stupid moves or to make the perfect move. And it's difficult in a game to play chess or as something that would resemble chess because it's a computer. And if you won, that the computer just wasn't that it let you win. Or you can't outsmart a computer at chess. I mean, maybe you can, but
I think you bring up a good point because chess in particular has, I guess when you break it down, it's a fairly complex set of rules, but not really. Like you can pick it up pretty fast. Just have to know
and nothing
how
changes.
Pieces can move.
There's no variables. Yeah,
but
it is. Once you get it, you get it.
I haven't played chess enough in my lifetime to have had the exact same game of chess more than once. Like each time I've played chess,
that would never happen. Yeah.
Like I have, the game is played differently because I've moved a different pawn to start, or because I've like each game is different from the last one, And that's what makes it
it's
interesting.
fresh. It keeps
and like you're saying, part of that is the fact that you're playing another human being. Like
Right.
if you're playing a computer who did the exact same moves every time, then you would do the same moves because you'd know exactly what worked to beat it last time.
Right.
But stepping into tactical RPGs, I think that's true as well. When you got these large field maps with like all these different tiles you can go to, and there's terrain and all these different things, there are like so many different approaches to that. And I think each person, especially when you got a class system involved, like Final Fantasy Tactics, each person will play that a little differently, and there's room to experiment and to get creative. And chess is very much about creativity when you get to like high levels of play. Learning how to use pieces in ways people don't expect. And so I think that I personally, though, like I appreciate when RPGs become a little bit more action-based, and there's like a level of skill that's necessary to be able to dodge and block and attack and recognize patterns. Having that come into play,
innovated that.
Right, where you timing certain buttons or whatever. But specifically this week I played Crosscode. I made a video for it on Monday. And Hyper Light Drifter is an example of a similar kind of game where there is like this baseline where you've got to be good at dodging, avoiding getting hit, and attacking the boss at the right time and recognizing patterns and stuff. It's that part of it is something you have to become good at and skilled at, and that's challenging and difficult, and it takes a lot of thought and energy to like figure that out. But on top of that, you layer that with a character progression system where items and accessories and equipment and level ups and boosting your stats can make the game easier. So I could go into a boss at level 10 and it'll be easier for me because I won't have to hit him as many times as I did at level 5, but I still can't take those hits. I still got to learn how to dodge and move and play the game well as in I guess addendum or what's the word I'm looking for? That's not really the right word. Anyways, alongside having a traditional sort of character progression system where the character gets stronger as he levels up or as she levels up or something like that. So that's why I tend to love games like Dark Souls, Hyper Light Drifter, even to some extent like Horizon Zero Dawn and games like that, because that character progression and equipment and stuff is all part of it and can make it easier, and you can strategize with that stuff. You can reduce elemental damage and things of that nature by switching your equipment. That's all there, but you still have to actually be good at the game. And that keeps things interesting for me. But I think on the other spectrum, tactical RPGs can also do that with just the level of creativity that's given to you and how you can approach the field map and fighting. So that doesn't really answer the question, because it's how do we make the turn-based RPG more interesting all the way through, and that's just hard. I would
there
suggest,
might be a reason why we don't see many of those anymore.
I would suggest, Captain Awesome, if you are not part of our Discord right now, join our Discord and talk to Heon on the server. He is creating a game right now, and he actually explained to me a pretty revolutionary, really cool idea for how to do this with a more traditional turn-based RPG. Talk to him about it, because he's got some great ideas. I wouldn't be able to do it justice by explaining it to you now, so hit him up on Discord and talk to him. He's got some good ideas on that.
That goes for anyone.
Yeah, of course.
Who wants to,
join
the Discord.
Get it?
Join our Discord.
I think that what I see the core issue of this as being like video games strive to maintain flow, right? And so like flow can't be maintained if your skill level is too high for the challenge that is being met. You're disinterested, right? But if your skill level is too low and the challenge is too high, then it's overwhelming. And there's a sweet spot in the middle where the skill level and the challenge meet each other. And that's what video games try to do, which is why some good video games you can stay up all night playing and just be like, where did the time go? Because you were in a state of flow, because they did a great job.
Right.
And so turn-based has the problem of
so many variables.
There tends to be a limited set of outcomes. Like Pokemon, for example, if each Pokemon only has 4 moves. Now those moves can change, but a lot of what adds more variety is stuff that comes from outside of the battle. You were exploring, or you saved up money, you bought this TM, or you evolved this guy at this point, so he learned this move before you evolved him, or all those strategies make it more interesting. So it's almost more of the prep and everything that makes that interesting. Same with the Persona games. Like Persona 4, I really did not like the battle system. Persona 5, I did like the battle system. But in both those games, late in the game, you can play the beginning of the game without having to mess with the Persona stuff if you don't want to. You don't really have to. But you're going to get later in the game and you're freaking going to have to. And to me, that worked to keep things at least more interesting, because it added that extra layer of like, okay, hold on, I should actually be like customizing a little more here. But those are all things that happen outside of battle. Turn-based emphasizes preparation before the battle.
Right.
Action video games, for the most part, if you have a certain skill level inherently in yourself, like there are people that play Dark Souls naked and like beat the whole game, right? Yeah. So it's not strictly about your preparation going in. You could not play, you couldn't beat Pokemon with a level 1 Pokemon, your starter, like and beat the Elite Four. Like you wouldn't be able to do it. So the difference there is that action games have a built-in kind of advantage that you yourself could be progressing in your skill level. And most RPGs simulate that progression. Instead of actually having you progress, they make you feel like you're progressing. And so it may, because either maybe the battle system is not actually that deep or whatever. And so they keep you coming back because, oh, I'm close to a new level, or I could find another Pokemon, or I want to know what happens next in the story or something. But like we were talking about with Dragon Quest, you wouldn't just sit there and grind out Dragon Quest battles just for fun, just because. But there are people that would like go and just fight a particular Dark Souls boss just because they want the challenge of, I want to try something different this time, and I want to, see if I can beat him naked or something like that. Now, people do like Nuzlocke challenges to Pokemon to make the game more interesting, and I think that does a lot to bring that level of challenge up, to maintain that flow a little more. But that's also for the really brutal types that like a Pokemon dies and it's dead forever.
Yeah, you kill your Pokemon.
Yeah, you literally kill your Pokemon
to not die,
and it makes it like the stakes really high.
Right.
So I think Pokemon and Persona do a decent job, but like the problem inherent in every turn-based RPG I've ever played is that it relies on preparation before the battle. And once you're in the battle, that's oftentimes almost a predetermined outcome. Now, like strategy RPGs do a great job of giving you more variety. In Trails in the Sky, what I really like that they do is a similar kind of thing where you can move your characters around, and it's turn-based, but there's position and area of effect attacks and stuff like that. But that battle system is boring as crap when you only have like 2 characters. And most of the time you do only have like 2 characters. Yeah. As soon as you get like 3 or more, all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is sweet. This is like, I love the battle system. But then a dude like leaves your party like, I'm going to go do this, and to their part of the story. And you're like, crap, I'm down to like my 2 people again. This is boring.
Sometimes,
there's just not enough to do. Positioning 2 people. It's like if you play basketball, like there's 2-on-2 basketball, but to me that's like the least interesting form of basketball that exists. You know what I mean?
I'd rather just play a couple games of 1-on-1 than play 2.
Yeah, totally. But when you have a full team against a full team, there's so much you can do with that, and it becomes really interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know. I'm not really sure. Again, I don't have an answer for
I also think that the part of the reason why this is so apparent in turn-based RPGs is because they're so difficult to balance, because you have to take into account, what if a player comes to this boss and they're 5 levels lower than what we suggest? What if they don't have this weapon that they could get in the chest? What if they don't have this and that? We got to make it so that they can beat this boss, having not come across any of these secrets or whatever, or not having the most sound understanding of all the mechanics. But what about the person who comes in 10 levels over with all of that equipment? There's so many
Pokemon
variables.
Has the badge system, right? Like if your Pokemon get too high leveled, they'll disobey you, and it doesn't benefit you. Yeah.
It's just a hard thing to balance for. Like the entire idea, the entire system behind most turn-based JRPGs is a difficult one to balance for all kinds of players. You're going to have some people think it's too hard, some people think it's too easy, some people think it's just right, and none of them are wrong. It's just about how they prepared, like you're saying, before they got there. So anyways, yeah, it's a really tough thing to balance. But again, talk to Heon because he has a pretty cool idea about how to control that so that anyone can come in, no matter what their preparation is, and feel like they get some challenge out of it.
I would be interested if it's even possible to make a video game with a turn-based battle system with no level system.
Oh, yeah.
You don't level up. Would it still even work at all at that point? You could have maybe skills level up, but nothing, not even skills. You know what I mean? I'm trying to
think that there is something like that, but I can't think of what it is.
Would people play that game? If you took the leveling system out of most turn-based games.
Well, I'm trying to think. I mean,
it's so almost not an RPG
To
anymore.
reach that next level, like I'm trying to think that's
because that's just such a central part of what RPGs are.
But it also inspires that like gambling instinct, you know, that like. You know, that reward system. I mean, it's cheap to just see a number change from 19 to 20 and have that be a reward that the game is based around. But it really is a big deal
because this is
when that number changes from 19 to 20. It is a big deal.
This is something I thought about. Skyrim, for example, has a system where the enemies scale their level with you, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to level up to freaking basically like dominate that game. If you don't like, the Elder Scrolls is basically always been structured that way. Leveling up is technically meaningless, except for the fact that it unlocks other abilities.
Kind of like Final Fantasy VIII, right? Then that was
yeah. So it's like if you were to remove that completely, would it not be an RPG? And if that is the case, is Skyrim, for example, not a role-playing game anymore because the enemies match whatever your level is? They're giving you a number. Because you want a number to feel like you're moving forward, and you have skill trees you're progressing through.
That's right, yeah.
But
in that sense, it's got those elements.
But if Skyrim was like being like honest, I suppose you could say, and your level wasn't even a thing, and the enemies were always what they were, you were always what you were, but you had like a skill tree you worked through.
You just get skills, instead of levels and stats.
Because it never made any sense to me. It was like, well, I got stronger, but also they all got stronger, so the game's not uninteresting. So why did I get stronger?
Which sort of does make the game uninteresting because every battle is just as hard as the one before it, even though you're stronger. And that
every time you fight a mud crab, the mud crab is just as hard to beat as the last one.
Yeah, exactly.
The wolves, man, all these wolves.
Yeah, you know what's funny though? With Final Fantasy 12, they this has been a problem for well over a decade now that RPG game companies have been trying to figure out how to make RPGs interactive and interesting, but not so monotonous, especially for Western audiences. But Final Fantasy 12 had the idea, you don't go into battles, they happen seamlessly, your characters automatically attack, and you talk about preparing before battle. Final Fantasy 12 does that, about as much as you can do that, given the gambit system, and obviously all of your items and everything. You've got to be well prepared before you go into a battle, otherwise it's going to be difficult for you, right? But then when you go into battle, you're not doing a ton. You don't have to hit a button to attack an enemy. You don't have to tell anyone what to do. Your dude just does it, right, in time, and you end up just running towards enemies and like putting the controller down while Vaughn and everyone just kind of sits there and fights.
Was before the battle even happened.
Right, yeah. And that's considered an innovative, take on RPGs, but it doesn't really make it that much more interactive. Yeah, sure, it was interactive ahead of time, but once you've got your stuff set up, it is the opposite of interactive when you get into a battle, unless it's a boss and you got to go and use all your potions. But even then, you can still set up gambits for that stuff. When your character's below 20% health, use a high potion. It's like if you are very well prepared, the battles are extremely boring. And so I don't know. This problem has been attempted to be fixed so many times, and I don't know. But yeah, talking to Heon's probably a pretty good idea. We should have Heon on a podcast one of these days. He's in Japan. His timing is a little different.
Heon cast.
Heon cast. He was on the one that I did.
Live one when we were in Colorado.
The live one, yeah. And then I had him on for a Final Fantasy 12 discussion one time. But actually, maybe we should have him on just to talk about his ideas. I don't know if he'd want to do that because he is making the game right now, and I'm sure that he doesn't want to give that idea away to people too much. But anyways, that's why I didn't want to explain it. First of all, I wouldn't be able to do it justice. Second of all, I want
It's his idea.
Give his idea out to people.
Yeah.
What's called it's a draw system. And so what you do is like, you don't fight. You get these things.
They're called Pikmin. You pull them out of the ground. And they fight for you.
Good question. Let's move on to Chocolate Rob's question here. What are the most or least interesting parts of creating your reviews, Lost in Translations, Dark Histories? What interesting, surprising things have you learned from making them? You guys want to go first on that one?
Sure. My favorite part is, I think that you might share the same one here, is research, is looking up things. Like when I was researching the Nintendo PlayStation, my mind was being blown at how much I was finding out and how close these companies were and all the interactive stuff. Now, Nintendo, in 1988, the NES had only been around for 2 years, right? Or 3 years.
85, right?
In America, at least 3 years, right? And Nintendo was already contemplating moving to CDs, right? In 1988, they had their contract with Sony, and Sony began developing a CD system that would supplement the SNES. But they didn't actually implement any form of disc media except for the 64DD, but they didn't really push that until 2002 or 2001 with the GameCube. And it's like they had been planning this before anyone except for like computer gamers, right?
Right.
Yet they were the last to implement it. They implemented it after everyone, and it screwed them over. But when I learned about that, I was like, holy crap. Like that's huge, right?
Yeah.
But
that's
anyway,
crazy.
so the research phase of these games and just like looking into this stuff and figuring out how all these deals went down, and specifically when I can't find out how a deal went down and I start going into the really more obscure posts or going into like Google will highlight certain spots of certain books using like a PDF viewer, right? And you
that's
can
where I
only
get most of my
view
stuff
a few
from
exactly
Google books.
because the Wikipedia doesn't talk about it. Nothing talks about. You can't find it in any article, but someone wrote a book where they mentioned it in probably an unrelated book, honestly. And you've got to go through a lot of stuff before you find that book. But once you find it and it's cited and you have like a credible source, it's freaking sweet. Like I don't know. It sounds like I'm
having like a breakthrough
stuck in college, but
research,
breaking through and finding out something that very few people know. Like with the Yakuza Dark History, or with the like Final Fantasy 15 Project W stuff. Like there is stuff that no one knows about, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be the first one to like inform people that this freaking happened. But anyways, that's my favorite part.
Yeah, I think I would agree. That's my favorite part, is just reading. In fact, I'll take it so far that I'll compile way too much research, and then I'll have like a really hard time parsing it into like a narrative. And it's it's like holy crap. Like I'll usually outline what I want to talk about initially, and then I'll do all my research, and that will always change. It'll always end up being something completely different. Most of the time, because my preconceived notions going into a topic were wrong, and I find out how little I actually knew about that thing.
Right.
And then I start digging deeper and reading more and realizing because it's like if I'm gonna come out here and tell people this is how it is, I freaking have to be like so sure that what I'm saying is right. And there have been things that I have like held back from including because I was not confident enough that like the source was legitimate or that what I was saying made enough sense. So, but that's my favorite phase. But I like it so much that it almost makes the videos harder to make, because, like for example, the mascot thing, which is a multi-part thing, which might actually end up being 3 or 4 parts in the end. I don't even know. I have almost 30 pages of notes.
Holy crap, dude.
Yeah, and because I keep finding more stuff.
That's freaking crazy.
The problem is the mascot episode was supposed to be about you, Kata, like, what do you call mascots?
Cute, like culture or something?
Yeah, they're like characters that are used to advertise, like, come to Osaka, we've got, this kind of, so come to Wakayama, we've got these oranges, or come to
well, go to Hokkaido.
Funabashi,
We have these
consume-
onsen, right? Or,
or like we sell melons.
So they're supposed to be
melon
like context sensitive to the area.
Yeah.
yeah.
They have
It's
something.
like this town's famous for like.
Yeah.
You know, they always say something you made nani de you made, or like, what are you famous for?
Yeah.
Like,
So like I start out writing a thing about those, and it connected with video game mascots because, to be honest, there's things I want to write about that have nothing to do with video games, and I don't think people would be very interested in watching those, or at least they don't have a lot of like they're not as marketable. Like the people aren't searching for that crap. Like people, I find a lot of things in academic journals online. There are new things that I've never seen people talk about before, but not in the academic world. But the academic world doesn't have the presentation that fits with most people's attention spans
for YouTube, right?
For YouTube. And so then I take this idea and then I package it in a way that it works for YouTube, because like people don't want to sit there and read these really dense academic journals because and there's some freaking cool stuff in some of these, like theories about like why Pokemon works the way it does and stuff like that I'd never heard anybody talk about before, but they're written in a really dense way. And so it's almost important to like take that research and just make it interesting at all. And sometimes I get stuff I'm like, I don't think, like my biggest issue with a lot of lost in translations I've done is I look back on them, I'm like, I don't think this is interesting enough. Like usually
you just got to break it up with skits, dude. You got to get the mascot
right?
uniforms and like go out and do social experiments.
The one thing,
social experiment.
dress up as a
What do you know
Yuru
about
go out
Japan?
and we had our own
That's spreading
Yuru.
the
We had our
word.
own Yuru kata early in our channel's history. It was Mike in a medieval helmet. And we were like that was like what we were known for, right? Mike in a medieval.
That's
helmet.
right. Mike would wear it around town sometimes.
And
yeah.
we
That's
were
true.
like at a In-N-Out or something, and I think we got a bunch of people. We drive around town, and like Mike would have it on to be looking at people. And remember, we got way into Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares at one point, and he had an episode where he helped this one restaurant by going out and starting a campaign for real gravy, right? Like going out to talk to people
you
about,
go
like,
out in the streets,
real gravy.
take it
Can
to
you
the
taste
streets.
the difference? Yeah. And then go check it out. You can get it here. And we were talking about, dude, we need to go out there and be wearing crazy stuff and just be telling people, there's this YouTube channel you need to see. And that was our own YouTube channel. But I don't know. Like I really enjoy making them, but definitely the research part is, I think, the most interesting to me. Like I end up with a ton of. That's why I always post a link to like my notes in the description, because there's always like a crap ton of stuff I didn't include. And if anyone else cares enough, I don't want someone else researching the same thing to have to like go all across the internet
to find.
I've compiled this, like I've done the work to make this condensed format with all the sources cited. Like I'm almost more proud of those than the actual videos, because if anyone runs across it, it's just like, here's every freaking thing you could. Like,
I did that for my
want to know.
Yakuza video, because I was like, people are going to call me out on this, and they're wrong. I'm freaking right. They won't believe me. Like, I am putting all my stuff in the description, like laying it straight out. Like this, look it up, dudes.
Yeah,
this happened. Yeah,
like for Lost in Translation specifically, I didn't want it to be another show where it was like, did you know that such and such was based on like this goddess or whatever? Like there's a place for that on YouTube, and I really appreciate a lot of those channels, because I mean I watch those too, but it's like there's enough of that. You know what I mean? Like, there's what's making this different. And so taking a more academic / technical slant to it hopefully makes it different enough for some people. It's never going to get the social, experiment skit
traffic,
the James Rolfe treatment. Like, and that's just not who I am. I'm just not someone who would ever do the James Rolfe thing.
It's so funny because almost every channel that does that, they get some level of attention, I think, almost just because they do the skits. Like freaking like Spoonie with his Final Fantasy reviews, he has the skits in the middle of them where he'll dress up and like have a whole thing with characters going on side by side. And James Rolfe with the Angry Video Game Nerd did the same thing.
That's Angry Joe, I think.
Angry Joe does it as well. Tons of skits in between. There's there's a certain subset of people that just like love that.
They want skits, man.
I hate that personally. I don't hate it. I think actually the early Angry Video Game Nerd videos were really good, and he did that like perfectly. He almost innovated that whole
before
genre
everyone
of video.
started copying him, straight up copying him. It was really cool. It was really fresh and unique and different.
And it was so genuine coming from him.
It really was.
It felt like the character was a real person reacting in a real way to something.
Yeah.
But every other channel I've ever seen do that, they feel so
it's not
acted and just like forced, and like it doesn't do it for me at all. And even his later seasons of Angry Video Game Nerd start to feel the same way. I can tell he gets tired of it.
Yeah.
And didn't necessarily want to have the show go on for as long as it has.
Well, knowing, looking into who he is and in his background, like we know that what he wants to be doing is making films. He wants to make movies. He wants to be a director. Mm-hmm. And so he loves video games. He has played enough bad video games to, last a lifetime. Well, actually, I think that's the funny thing. I think he had done all of the really bad games that he genuinely despised and hated. And it's like, you're on season 12 now, and you already did it. Like, you sure go play a new game and come up with some reason why it's as bad as the other ones.
I haven't watched
but the fact is, you did the worst games already. Like, those are in the past.
Yep.
Be getting less angry.
He should be getting.
He did. He has gotten less angry. That's the point, and it's not as fun to watch anymore because it doesn't feel genuine. But I remember watching specifically the Karate Kid one, which is one of his very first episodes, and like just the way he strings those words together came out so naturally, and I've never heard anyone say that combination of swear words before, and it was so passionate and so freaking funny that I was dying, and it was like, this guy's
and especially
awesome.
Coming from him, the way he looks, the way he presents himself, generally speaking, before he starts going on his tirade is like, this is a well-reasoned college. He's like a Boy Scout, and here he is just like, flipping the bird to these video games. It's just so perfect.
Taking a diarrhea dump on him. Anyways, got a little bit off topic there, but
what about you, Mike?
I'm totally down with not doing skits in videos. I think that's totally lame. But I'll start with my the part that's least interesting to me. I hate recording footage. I hate it. I hate the process of recording and logging footage. And this is what happened in this video, and this is because you have to do that. I made the mistake early on of not doing that, and all the files were named their default names, like C1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, blah, 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 blah. And then, like, the next one. And I had no idea, repeating, of course, I had no idea when I was editing the video where I could find what I was looking for. Like, I want this scene. Oh, crap. Start watching, like, hour-long videos trying to, like, find that part. And so I had to start logging them. But, like, it's just such a chore to be like, okay, I just recorded 30 minutes of video. What happened in this video? Watch. Skip around. Oh, yeah, that happened. That's something I might want to use later. So I have to name the file. This happened, and this happened, and this happened. Kind of thing, almost. Unless it's, like, a sequence where it's, like, really well summarized. Like, I could just put Nibelheim incident. Or something like that. It's like, that whole scene is this. I know that's there. But if there's like something in the gameplay that happens, something funny or wacky or something specific to my playthrough that I want to save for later, I've got to go through and log that so that I know where to find it later. Mm-hmm. I hate that.
Especially, man.
Yeah, especially for the fact that a lot of these games I'm playing for like the 6th or 7th time sometimes. Like I'm playing it again just to record footage. Where I would really like to just write my review and make my video and not play the game again, so I've already played it a bunch of times. So it's just the monotony of that.
Actually, okay, I wanted to point out, for people listening or watching, if you guys don't realize, Mike has the highest quality footage of any of these Final Fantasy games in his reviews. Like,
it's true.
And that's a point of pride for him. Yeah. So if you go back and look at the reviews, it's like it is the best that it could possibly look. And I know it's like, oh, it's an old game, like whatever, but like no, look, like compare it side by side with other crap people have uploaded, and like Mike records like really pristine footage.
It takes up a lot of disk space.
He's always fine with this.
So many freaking hard drives full of Final Fantasy game footage and Xenogears game footage and 100, 200 gigabytes, 300 gigabytes, sometimes up to 400 gigabytes of footage. Back when I was doing fraps, which is, don't do fraps. it's even more. Like, you get the best footage. It's lossless. Like, it's literally exactly the same quality as what came out of the game. But you'll have several terabytes worth of footage if you record with fraps. But in any case, that's the least interesting part to me. I hate having to deal with that and just the technicalities that go into it. Like you guys have said, I really enjoy the research. I love learning, specifically for the reviews. I love learning the thought process of the creators. I love like digging into like what were they going for, and that goes a long way towards changing my my opinion about a lot of these games I play too. When I first started doing the Final Fantasy reviews, I had little retrospectives in front of all of them, but I didn't focus as much on the developers themselves as I did like this was like the timeline of events. This happened, then this happened, then this happened, then the game was released. And more recently, I've been trying to delve into like what was the philosophy of this guy? Like, what did he want to do when he was thinking about this idea or whatever, and how did that like come across or not come across, and why? That part of it is so much fun to learn, and it's just so informative to me about like the limitations that these guys dealt with and how hard it was for them and how much they went through, and they slept in their office on the floor for like 3 months straight, and like they put their heart and soul into it, and it still came out in a way they weren't happy with, and people criticize it so easily and don't realize all the work that went into that. It really gives a level of perspective to these games that I would have never had, without doing that kind of research. So I definitely love doing the research too, but I think actually surprisingly my favorite part is the musical transitions. The way that I spend a lot of time making sure that this piece of music plays here and that this particular crescendo plays on this word that I say. And then when I transition to this thought, we transition into a different song that fits with what I'm saying here. I put a lot of thought into how I use the music in the reviews to sort of like build emotion in the right places. And to sort of like put emphasis on what I'm saying so that like it'll come across even more strongly than it would have just with the words alone. And so I actually have the most fun with that part of the process. Actually, that brings me to another point. Another thing I don't like is recording it. Recording the voiceover is so tedious because I mess it up and I mess it up and I say it weird and I go back and listen to it. It's like, that's not how I want to say that. I'll have like 3-hour-long files of me messing up these lines over and over again that I have to go through and sort through and pick the right takes and sometimes combine this part of the sentence with this one. And that takes so much time. But right after I do that part of it, right after I finally have the actual voiceover nailed down, that's when I do, the next part I do is the music. And so I love doing that part. I like get that all ready, and then it's like, okay, now we start dragging and dropping in the video files. So yeah, for me, those are my kind of favorite parts and least favorite parts of the process. But right now, I am basically done with the Final Fantasy XII review. I have to record it, so it's like it's a nearly 8,000 word script, which translates to about a 45-minute video.
So it's it was your favorite game. It was the best game.
It was the hardest game to talk about because there's so much in it, and there's so much you can miss.
It is the longest of the Final Fantasies to the game's defense credit. I don't know
for sure,
but to your point, that is the longest of the games.
And so I'm going to do one more edit, see if there's anything I can cut, but I've already done that to a large extent. It's just going to be a long video, and so it's going to be a long audio file to edit that I'm going to have to record take after take after take after take after take. So not looking forward to that. Anyways,
there we have it.
HD Baird, last question. Idea for a topic, just what is Final Fantasy? What links all these stories? What themes, philosophies, feeling, etc.? Even though the creative direction changed after 10, there's still an adherence to an approach that sets them apart from other RPGs.
I have the thought on what is Final Fantasy. I have it. I figured it out. And I touched on this last podcast, but I'm going to say it again because it's more direct this time. So what a Final Fantasy is, and you can make these yourself, create a company that is constantly teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, so that every game you make is like your last game ever. If it fails, you're screwed. Your company goes bankrupt, right? Every time. And then make a fantasy game, and it literally is your final fantasy. It is the last fantasy game that you will ever make, and if it doesn't succeed, you're screwed every single time. And you can make like 15 of them, and your company is still, for some reason, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. If this one fails, you're screwed. Even after 15, you've done it correctly. You know what a Final Fantasy is. You know why it's final, and there you go. That's my take on it.
There's Final Fantasy right there.
I kind of touched on this earlier. I think that Final Fantasy, at its heart, is almost always about self-discovery, learning who you are in the world, and learning how to not do things on your own, I guess, like learning to rely on good friends to help you where you're weak. They all seem to run with that same kind of theme. They have various other themes, of course, but I think that at its center is almost what all of them seem to touch. So, yeah, that's probably what I would say Final Fantasy is for the most part.
Emphasizes community, ties, and friendship.
I would not. Who would have thought, dude? Yeah, like Landon's touched on this in his Lost in Translation series too. I mean, the idea of collectivism being strongly associated with parties, managing parties, where this guy's good at this, and this guy's good at this, and this guy's good at this, and this person's good at this, and like you use them together to like form like the perfect unit that can do it all, right? It's very much a Japanese way of thinking, I think, just in general with their society. So that has a very strong tie into Final Fantasy, but it also does with Dragon Quest and a lot of their games that they make too, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's almost always a coming-of-age story. People who are about that age, teenager to young adult, learning where they fit, who they are, what they can do, what they want to do, who they want to be. That's just kind of what Final Fantasy is all about, for the most part. And, of course, killing God through the power of friendship.
And killing God. But, that's only in, like, 12 of them. Come on. No, I do like that, though. I do like that. And that works really well. You're always a character who is, deep down inside, very unsure of themselves.
Yep.
And very, very confused. Like, they may, on the outside, be super skilled at fighting. They may come across very confident, but on the inside, when their ideals get challenged, it destroys them, and it's pretty, it's pretty heavy. It's good. I do like that about the Final Fantasy games.
Yep.
I would add that there's a really strong current of experimentation as well throughout the series. Obviously, they're not afraid to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
For better or for worse.
For better or for worse. But you've got to respect that part of what makes a Final Fantasy game is the fact that they aren't doing what they did last time.
Right. In that sense, that is the riskiest thing ever. Like, they created a franchise that does not have a streamlined main character representing all the games. They created a franchise,
the closest
Chocobo or Moogle,
Moogle,
the things that came out around like Final Fantasy 3, 4-ish. Yeah, it's crazy, but they're able to do it, and they succeeded at making something new every time. That should be encouraged.
Yeah, and it was just a big deal for a large budget franchise.
Mm-hmm.
You look at, like, it's really easy. The low hanging fruit is like Call of Duty, and they do the same thing every time. But like
Mario.
The reality is RPGs, that's such a broad genre. There's a lot of possibilities. There's a lot of crap you could do with that. There's a lot of stuff that is just sitting out there that nobody's done yet. Heian has his own thing he's hit on that nobody's done yet. It's tough in shooters to, like, what has nobody done in a shooter? But like in JRPG or just RPGs at all, what has no one done in an RPG? Well, everyone can. Everyone's
there's a lot.
Yeah, and so it's great that they're the flagship of RPGs globally, in the sense that they're constantly pushing the boundaries, and everyone can look at them to do that. And you might hate what they do, but that's not the point. Yeah,
they're trying. trying to do different stuff, and sometimes people don't like it.
That's,
a lot of times
that's also part of what makes Final Fantasy is it does challenge, the player to some extent with, the way the battle system works, or they're constantly innovating and they're constantly changing things.
What makes Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy disease.
Final Fantasy disease.
The fact that no one can agree on what Final Fantasy is. That's what makes a Final Fantasy.
I know.
What makes Disney Disney?
Disney disease.
Disney disease.
What is Disney? Is Snow White Disney, or is the Sword in the Stone Disney, or is the Lion King Disney?
Go back.
Or is what's the freaking one?
Steamboat Willie.
Recently?
Steamboat Willie is Disney.
Is Mickey Mouse Disney? Mickey Mouse is Disney, but
quite literally.
or is freaking like Frozen Disney? What's Disney? What is it?
Depends on when you were hired.
No, for real though, I think Star Wars disease is going to happen because you're going to have kids who
grew up there's totally Star Wars disease.
That's right, the prequel kids,
and they're like, this is it as much as anything else.
Star Wars disease is active and fatal within me, dude. I have a fatal case of Star Wars disease right now.
To you, Star Wars is Episode 5, right?
Yep.
And that's like
Empire Strikes Back is Star Wars.
You can kind of see Star Wars disease well at work within the directors who keep getting fired and deposed from these Star Wars projects that they're working on very late in development, very late in production. It might be development. Yeah, if it's all green screen, then it totally is just development. It's not actually anything.
Oh my gosh.
Star Wars disease, yeah, real thing.
My Star Wars disease is at a super advanced phase.
So advanced that you won't even watch the new one.
It's about to kill me. I have one more chance at redemption right now. If I don't like this next Star Wars movie, I'm done.
Hey, Mark Hamill says that this new movie is doing something no one's ever seen before.
Boy, he did.
Has no reason to try and sell these films, so we can take his word for it.
Oh, jeez, Mark Hamill. The thing that's funny about Mark Hamill is he'll come on and say he'll do a statement like that. He'll come on and say "Oh, I saw it, it's so good." But then he'll have interviews where he talks about how he disagrees so much.
Yeah, totally.
He disagrees so much with what they're doing with Luke Skywalker. He could not have possibly ever seen the character going that way.
Yeah.
And he's just really disagreed with Rian Johnson about it. But
he's got to promote the movie because he's making 3 to 4% back end profit off of that thing.
Yep.
That's a lot of money. Dude.
Yeah.
So he'll flip flop on it all the time. He'll show up to Comic-Con and be so excited about it, and then he'll get an interview with some underground publication. He'll get real for a second, and then realize, I shouldn't have said that. And
it's
he does that a lot.
I feel like it's like the most recent Game of Thrones, for example, where they're beyond the books, right? You're in this territory. Yeah, where before it was the guy who created it, this is his vision, right? And George Lucas, the guy who created Star Wars,
this is
his vision. We're beyond that.
Who
now,
cares what
anyone can, people are scrutinizing even George Lucas's vision. They're going to scrutinize the crap out of any random.
Now it's
to write a Star Wars story. All of a sudden, it's going to be well, this wasn't supposed to happen. Well, now who's to say?
Yeah, who's to say?
Okay, whoever Russian hackers that are out there or whatever. If you watch our podcast, I want you to freaking hack Lucasfilm, and I want to know. I want to know.
This is libel right here, man.
I'm pulling Donald Trump.
Know what he actually had.
I just thought it would be nice if they. I just want to know what George Lucas. I want to know what he had planned.
You know what? I'll bet you that Tetsuya Nomura knows. He knows because he works with Disney.
Oh.
I'm sure he knows. He's probably feeding them ideas for what to do after episode 9.
Oh, if they're taking ideas from him.
Oh, totally. Oh, I did hear, this is totally a rumor, but apparently Disney is interested in making a Kingdom Hearts film. You heard it here first.
Who told you that?
No, this was, I think HMK and a couple other guys were talking about it. The Gamers Joint, Cynical, and a few of the Kingdom Hearts people are going on about this whole possibility, which I do think is a pretty good possibility.
Talk about a game that doesn't translate well to film.
Oh my gosh, yeah. There's so many little storylines.
I would say that one's not one that would do well.
Yeah, they'd have to do. It would have to be purely original. They can't do this Disney World hopping if they're gonna make a movie out of it.
Be the Kingdom Within.
Yeah, it would have to be like Birth by Sleep. Yeah.
Like, I think the only way they can make it work is to make it an animated film in the vein of like Frozen or something like that, which they'd have to Disneyify too much. I think
they would.
Might not. I just don't think it would work as a movie.
It would probably be more like what would you call it? Not like a short, but like a direct to DVD, like like an online video on demand kind of thing.
Like Advent Children.
Yeah, I doubt it would be $100 million big theatrical wide release. But yeah, like Advent Children, Disney might have some interest in at least taking advantage of the 20 million people who are fans of Kingdom Hearts. Yeah, it may not be enough to sell to like a large theater chain and have premieres and all that, but it definitely is enough to make them a pretty good profit if they just do it on demand and not put so much money into it.
Yeah.
Well, guys,
okay,
that's what Final Fantasy is according to us. We can get more into that, but we have a lot actually in other podcasts, and we will probably still talk about it again in the future. But
that's all the questions for today. Thank you for asking. If you want to ask a question for our podcast, easiest way to do that is to leave it right down below in the comments. We check there. We always go to our Patreon account first and let our patrons have first go at asking questions. So we always source them there first. We go to Discord and we come right here to YouTube in the comment section. You could also send us a question on Facebook or Twitter, any way you'd like. So if you're watching this, I meant to say if you're listening to this audio only, then go ahead and check out our YouTube channel. It's Dark Pixel Gaming. We do game analysis, reviews, and different kind of shows there, delving into games and Japanese culture and all kinds of stuff like that. If you'd like to see our filmmaking, you can go over to Dark Pixel, just straight up Dark Pixel. And we made a movie for that channel that can't come out for like a year. But we made it.
We made it. It's done. It looks good too. Mike did a score for it. Sounds awesome. Looks good. You'll see it later.
You'll see it in the future. It's a pretty cool video. Yeah. Anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting the podcast. And we'll see you guys again next week. And nothing confirmed yet, but I talked to the developers of Crosscode. And they may want to join us on a podcast and talk about game development. So
call it a crosscast.
Crosscast. Dark Pixel Crosscast next week. Maybe. We'll see if he responds by email. All right. See you guys later. Peace out.
Yeah. Peace.